Is Charlie,
And I'm Neil.
and today we're going to be bringing to you a public question and answer session on the topic of confidence and self-esteem. What we've identified as an organisation is that during the current climate, with COVID going on and everything and all the restrictions that we've been having, mental health has really started to come into the forefront. And what we have decided to do as a mental wellbeing organisation is give the wider community an opportunity to connect with some of the bigger topics around mental wellbeing and to gain some invaluable insight into the world of mental health. What we are here to do today specifically is to answer any and all of your burning questions around the topic of confidence and self-esteem. But who are we? There's every chance you've not met us before. So what we are, number one, we are not academics. We are not medically trained. But what we are able to bring to the table is something a little bit different. We are people who've had lived experience in mental health, who have got an invaluable and unique insight into the way that sometimes we can fall into certain holes, but also insight into how it is that we can start to manage ourselves and to take ourselves out of those holes. So what we want to really be doing today is actually offering some of that unique insight perhaps that we have. And to that end, like I said, any questions that you might have, any comments that you want to bring to the table, please do, because we're going to be rocking with absolutely all of those. My role within the organisation, I'm a wellbeing coach here at Isopia, and what that means for me is that I spend the vast majority of my time on the front lines supporting our members and starting to understand the difficulties that they're in, but also starting to show them ways that they can better manage their mental health issues.
And as I say, my name's Neil, and I do exactly the same job role as Charlie here. We speak to people on a daily basis in terms of the struggles that they might have. And we kind of define a pathway that they can work upon to get themselves back out of some of the holes that we find ourselves in. And confidence and self-esteem is a really, really fundamental part of creating that pathway back to where you want to be.
So for me, it's a central piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
And to that end, what we've got now for the next hour or so is an opportunity for us to bounce around some of those ideas. So to start us off, I think we're not going to look at a question quite right now, but I think it's important for us to actually understand what it is that we're talking about. So confidence and self-esteem. A lot of people kind of intuitively think that they're the same thing. After all, they are quite close. They're quite closely related. The way that I like to think about them is that they're cousins, effectively. What we're talking about when we're talking about confidence is how we feel in our ability to navigate the world around us, to be able to excel or not in different aspects of our lives. So, for instance, I might say that I'm quite confident perhaps at doing a public life. I'm quite confident at swimming, but I can outright guarantee you that I'm not confident at archery. External. I'm sure you can probably mimic some of that as well.
Yes.
On the other hand, self-esteem is very, very similar, but it is related to self-worth, to self-respect. Do we believe that we deserve love, happiness, and success? Or do we actually believe that somehow we're inferior, we're inadequate? So just to start off, to explain the broad difference between the two, confidence is external.
Yep.
And on the other hand, self-esteem is very much internal, how we feel about ourselves. I think we can start to have a look at the first question now, but I can already see that we've got a few comments coming in. We've got a hello, we've got someone saying hello to Rachel, which is very nice, hello as well, and a few people just saying hi, very nice. So to start us off, the first question we picked up today. What came first? Was it your lack of confidence and self-esteem? Or was it your mental health problems? It's a juicy question.
It was a bit of a struggle when I first went through my workshops, when I was coming through the program, to actually, firstly, define the definition between the two, and secondly, kind of investigating what happened. So my scenario was that when I became unwell, that actually caused real lack of confidence and self-esteem. So from the point of view when I actually analysed that question, it was pretty defined to me that it came in that order. When I talk to a lot of people, which I'm sure Charlie has as well, it's different for everybody. It's different where if you lack self-esteem especially, that can create mental health issues, and that can actually grow into something a little bit different. And then the other side of it, which again was for me, was it was because I became poorly for different reasons that then actually had a real massive impact on my self-confidence.
That's it. I think the kind of the picture that you're starting to paint here so wonderfully, as well as the two go hand in hand.
Yes.
They're inextricably interlinked. And if I think back to my own experiences in mental health, I can start to see that I was probably quite an anxious child, so there was a little bit of anxiety there. But through life, as different kind of experiences started to happen to me, I found myself struggling with my self-worth. I wasn't matching up to this crazy idealized sense of who it is that I should be. I had some expectations that were way up here, and I was falling about here. And as I kind of struggled to get to where it is that I wanted in life, as I struggled with my university course, as I struggled to reconcile with this idea of where it is that I wanted to get career-wise, my self-esteem struggled. As my self-esteem struggled, my confidence started to go with it as well. I didn't feel like I was able to do things to the same level that I might been able to do before. And as my mental health dipped, funnily enough, one of the first things, if not the thing that perhaps caused it, was my confidence and self-esteem went. Do you know this? When we can start to look at the picture of mental health, we can start to see that there are so many different reasons potentially for why it is that we might fall into our issues. But I'm quite a firm believer that for the vast majority of people, and perhaps you'll be able to recognize this in yourself as well, as we go through life, we will experience good things, but we also experience hurt, tragedy, negative experiences. And from that, they can start to affect the way that we see ourselves. And as we struggle with the way that we see ourselves, we can start to tumble into loads and loads of different issues.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a personal question for you, Neil. When you started to become poorly, would you say that there was an internal turmoil, perhaps a lack of confidence or self-esteem that dipped you into that initially?
That's quite an interesting question, Charlie, because what I would suggest looking back now, when you have time to reflect on the work that you've done and where you've got to, I don't think there was an underlying issue in terms of my confidence and self-esteem. I think I built my career based on my self-worth, my self-esteem, my confidence. I actually, part of my job role was to actually present in front of lots and lots of people. So I don't think it kind of came from there. There were other elements in my life and my journey that got me into a situation where I started to take some action which was not the right kind of action, and started to actually remove myself from certain things. And then when I kind of realized that I needed to change that behavior that I'd instilled in myself, I didn't have the confidence. It just disappeared. It kind of just eroded from me. So that's a really interesting question. So again, on reflection, looking back, I don't think it was anything to do with that in terms of, we all have experiences in life, don't we? And we all have challenges, and some of us have adverse experiences. And I kind of dealt with that quite well until something kind of happened, but it wasn't, long historical thing. I think it's just something that happened in part of my life that then led me towards taking some different kind of coping mechanisms, which, now I shouldn't have taken, which then had a massive impact on my confidence. And then I found myself, Charlie, when I realized that that was one of the areas that I had to focus my energy on, I kind of wasn't really prepared to push myself out or back into areas because I had that issue where I was fearful. And I was extremely fearful of doing the things that I knew would get me out of that hole. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, isn't it? In terms of, we have to take specific actions to get from unwellness to wellness. And, in my experience, a lot of that is related to fear, without a doubt, certainly related to failure in your own head, which again feeds into your self-esteem. And it's how we really talk to ourselves about it and how we kind of start to reframe things in terms of coming away from that kind of thought process and changing not just the things you do and the actions that you take, but the way you actually start thinking about these things, rather than just capturing the information that's in your head at that time. If I'm going to try this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to fail at it. And it was just developing that mindset and moving it.
It's just that, like I said, it's that understanding of the things that are going on, belief, that actually leads to the creation of possibilities of alternatives within our own mind. I absolutely adore what you were saying about having perhaps built kind of a persona around your work. And then when things don't necessarily go our way, our confidence gets knocked. We can find ourselves struggling with that internal battle. Then off the back of that as well, anxiety. I'm going to come back to that point, but I see that we've got a comment that's come up. And we have a comment from Natasha that says, I think I've always had self-esteem issues. But when I became physically health declined, it got much worse and it all knocked onto each other. Depression, confidence, as most was hidden by me trying to put up a wall. And I adore this comment. I adore it in so many ways because it paints such a clear picture.
Absolutely.
It really does. So number one, always having had self-esteem issues, not necessarily having had that self-worth or self-respect. Something in your environment changes, your physical health. And as that physical health starts to decline, you've just painted this picture perfectly for us. Yeah. Knock on, depression, low mood, a disconnection that starts to come. As we start to disconnect from things around us, the things that give us value as well, anxiety starts to creep in. But there's one point in particular that I love in this comment here, hidden by me trying to put up a wall. And this just mimics a really interesting conversation that I had just a few days ago. I was talking to somebody that told me they'd spent nearly 60 years putting up a wall. They had possibly had a few struggles throughout their life. They'd kind of, avoided it, suppressed it, compartmentalized it, pushed it to the side, and they had buried themselves in their work. That was their mask. That was their ability of coping for a while. But also suddenly there was a physical health issue. They weren't able to continue with that mask. And then bam, suddenly they're faced with the reality of having to look inside and to do that internal work. So it looked like you had a thought on that.
Well, I think a lot of this comes from a little bit of a stigma around things and how, depending on, your sex, for instance. I was always told from a very young age that if you're a man, you shouldn't show your emotions. You should hide your emotions. It came across to me in younger years that was almost like showing weakness. But, through my journey, like you've absolutely said, you wear a mask for such a long period. And it leads to, like you said, lots of different mental health issues, which I think is why I found myself in the depths of depression, because I had put a mask on lots of things and suppressed it for such a long period of time. And that, again, which we're talking about today, has had a massive impact on my confidence and self-esteem, where I'd built my whole life around confidence and self-esteem. It was something else that I kind of just put this mask on. And that was, for me, Charlie, was based around a little bit of a stigma in mental health concerns.
That's it. I think it's probably something that still exists today.
Yes.
I think it's something that, thankfully, society is taking a harder look at, and there are lots of progressive changes around the way that we view mental health. But certainly, if we've had an upbringing where it's not okay to show emotion, it's not okay to show weakness, you're carrying these expectations that for you to be okay and worthwhile as a human being, you need to be operating up there.
Yes.
And if you're up there, that's the only way that you're going to be likable. Guess what the natural offset of that is? You fake it, you keep going, you don't take time to address it. And then one day, as is a lot of the time the case with mental health, there comes a point where it boils over, where it might lead to a breakdown of sorts, where suddenly everything is too much, people have to take a step back, and then they take an opportunity to start to do that introspective work. And that's where we come in.
Yes.
For the people that are ready to acknowledge that sometimes we can go through life for weeks, months, decades, years, without acknowledging some of the things that he's working on.
I think, Charlie, just on a note there, I firmly believe that had I not been truthful to myself initially, I probably wouldn't get where I am today. And that is very much about masking things. It's almost like I was finding myself saying, I can deal with this myself. I don't need any outside influences to help me out. So that was just masking. I really did need some support and some help. So yeah, I think a lot of that was down to that as well.
Possibly I'm not ready to recognise it. Perfect timing for another comment. I've recently lost both my nan and granddad, and my mental health is up and down in between. I've got a little summer job and really enjoying it. It gets me out, but I'm not indoors getting myself down as I tend to overthink things. And you see, this is a positive thing,
Yes.
actually. So, number one, we need to address you've lost two people that are very close to you in possibly quite quick succession as well. And if we're talking about the world of mental health, we're looking a little bit perhaps at depression here, low mood. Sometimes that can get confused with grief and the grief cycle, which is something that all of us are going to go through. But the natural offset of that is that we might be struggling to reconnect with the things that we want to do.
Yes.
If we're in the midst of sadness, we don't find joy in the things that we used to. We spend a lot of time locked in our own minds. But this is a really, really nice thing to notice. You know, we were talking about putting up a mask, weren't we?
Yes.
And the way that sometimes you can immerse yourself into this facade for years and years and years. What you're actually describing here, going outdoors, not indoors getting myself down and those things, so going outside, enjoying your summer job. Positive distraction has an absolutely hugely important place, I would argue, in the world of mental health. And especially when we're looking at things like loss and grief, it can take an amount of time, can't it, to process. Definitely. And anything we can do to make that ride easier is, it has to be acknowledged, it's an awesome, awesome way of managing. That's brilliant. Coming back to confidence and self-esteem just for a minute though, I think the thing that we need to establish here is that this is not a topic to be overlooked. It is pivotal and central to our stories of mental health. Just taking it back, we experience situations, they affect the way that we see ourselves, our ability to function, a natural consequence of feeling like we can't achieve things. Anxiety. As anxiety takes hold, where our comfort zones might once have been like this, where we're able to operate in the world, they start to shrink.
Yes.
Progressively over time. As we have that disconnection, as we're not doing things which match our values, naturally, we can find low mood sets in. And as low mood sets in, if we have that for a long enough amount of time, we can get slapped with the label of depression.
Yes.
And then we can find ourselves watching a live like this, perhaps. And that really starts to describe the cycle. The good news is that if you are recognizing that this could be an important topic to you, confidence and self-esteem are not fixed by any means. They are things that we can take active steps towards improving. And therein lies a lot of the base of this live. And I think we'll spend some time with them looking at ways that we can start to build our confidence and self-esteem. But there are plenty of things that we can do to get there. But to tap into something that you were saying earlier, anxiety. Sometimes we know the direction that we need to take, and that anxiety can stop us from taking those steps. But today we'll clarify a little bit around that and look at things that potentially might be able to motivate us towards taking those steps. So, should we have a look at the next question or comment?
Yeah. So somebody says, well done, Neil. Thank you very much. I'm just going to go up to another one here. And this is a reply to Natalie. So I'm assuming that you guys are talking to yourself, which is really, really encouraging. That's very, very good. So that one did say, it's just popped off my screen. So I'm going to have a quick look back so that we don't miss it.
There we go.
So this is a reply, and it says, thank you. Me too. I have a rare condition to 1 in 1 million SPS. I wonder if we have the same. Lupus and other autoimmune conditions. It's a lot to balance and has a huge impact on my mental health. You're not alone if you ever want to chat, which is really, really nice. Replying to somebody else's comment there. But just quickly going back to what Charlie says here, we're not experts in any kind of field, but obviously when you're together there and you're encouraging one another, that's an important part. So I don't want to go too deep into that comment because I can't really give you the answers that you might feel that you would like in that situation, but go on.
So there is one thing that's really nice about this comment.
Yes.
In fact, one of the things that we talk about is really, really important in terms of building our confidence and self-esteem is feeling part of a community.
Yes.
is about having a conglomerate or a group of people where you have common interests, like-minded, and you have that ability to feel support.
Yeah.
I know we were going to touch on this quite a lot at the end, but just around that kind of mention of community, we might be able to recognize in the past that there have been communities that we felt a part of. We might not be a part of them anymore, but what we are going to find is that what we have from these communities is a huge sense of connection. Connection is absolutely instrumental in us managing our mental health. If we can start to share our ideas, share our concerns, build in a common direction, then actually that has to form a part of the solution. It has to. Should we have a look at the next question? So, the question, I don't feel confident in talking to people and nobody could give me enough money to go outside. So I quite like that question. I do like that question. Not feeling confident in talking to people. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know about yourself, but I certainly had social anxieties.
Yes.
Still do from time to time. And nobody could give me enough money to go outside. The reason I quite like this one that we picked up a few weeks ago, nobody could give me enough money to go outside. There's this thing that I like to talk about in workshops. And I'll just give you guys the example. What I'm doing with our members is I will ask them who would like to come to the front of the workshop and who would like to do a presentation for 5 minutes on their journey through mental health. What we tend to find is that very, very few people, if any sometimes, say that they're willing to do that for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I then take the question a little bit further. I ask people, what if I offered you £10 to stand up in front of the whole room right now and just do that 5-minute little presentation? You get a few people umming and ahhing. I'm sure you've seen this as well before, and then maybe there's one hand that will creep up.
Yeah.
Then we have to tell them that we don't have £10 to give them, but we continue anyway with the question. What if I were to offer the person who made this comment £1 million to go into a social situation and to spend some time there for 5 or 10 minutes or so? What we'll find is that actually a majority of people might tend to say, yes, actually, for £1 million, I'm going to take that step. I would do it. And this points us to something that's quite interesting. Everybody is going to have different motivators. There is a reason that everybody has joined this live today. There is a reason that everybody is kind of pursuing this topic and wondering, why is it that we can get ourselves, what is it that I can do to get a little bit better? And all of us can have different motivators. For some, it might be financial. It isn't for the person that made this comment. They just don't mind about money, and actually that's quite an admirable thing.
Yeah.
I'm more money orientated, I shan't lie. But we can find that we're motivated for lots of different reasons. It can be progress of any type, whether that's in a feeling, in a relationship, in a career. People do job interviews if they don't feel confident because there's a motivating factor.
Yes.
They might be able to get something out at the end of it. But each of us is going to have a different motivator. And I think this is a really nice opportunity for us to pause and to reflect on what that motivator might be for each of us. You know, I was having a chat with some people not too long ago, and I heard some really nice things. Some people are motivated by their family. Some people are motivated because they want to get into a career. Some people are quite motivated by money. But when we started to have a little look at why everybody was in the room, why is it that everybody wants to learn to take these steps? Underneath it all, everybody's actually chasing the same thing.
Yes.
Which is, putting you on the spot,
Which is
happiness,
yes,
contentment. Everybody just wants
to feel
okay.
Okay, yeah.
That's it. It's nothing more than that. And just if we look back at this comment, I don't feel confident in talking to people. Nobody could give me enough money to go outside. Sometimes it isn't about the financial side. Sometimes it's not even about talking to people. But if we can start to recognize some steps that we might want to take that will build us towards our goals, get us to where it is that we want to be, we have to remind ourselves of why it is that we're going to be putting ourselves through this hardship.
Yes.
It's not always for money, but we have to keep our focus on that end goal. If we're able to take some of these steps, the prize that we stand to gain at the end is much bigger than any kind of £1 million. It's your life back.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Yes.
It's quite an interesting point in terms of some people, are financially driven. And when we're talking about happiness, that's what you're striving for. And sometimes you can lack confidence in doing things that actually make you happy. I'll give you my kind of scenario. Before I was unwell, I really enjoyed playing golf. It gave me the connection with lots of people. I joined a really good group. We could go and have a cup of tea, even if we didn't play golf. And it brought me that sense of happiness and belonging and being part of something. And I found myself just pulling away from that and not actually doing that. And after a period of time, I thought, well, why am I not doing that anymore? Because the fact that I was actually suffering, like you said, with a little bit of anxiety. I was fearful of doing something that I knew would give me back that sense of happiness, would pay me that dividend, would give me that reward. So it's really interesting. And I think we'll talk about this. It's actually, I would certainly say that everyone has confidence in something. It's just us kind of recognizing and transferring that into the things that are actually going to give you the rewards that you want, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
And it's so important for us to keep that focus. I've just seen a couple of nice comments that have come up. So I don't want to be vulnerable in old age. So that's a motivating factor right there. Contentment over money. So contentment, coming back to that.
Yeah.
It's important that we do bear these in mind as we go forward as well. I think we could have a look at the next question or comment, depending on what comes up next, and see where we're heading. Oh, it's a bit of a personal question, but actually, before we go into this, I think we should give our own personal answers for this. But I also think that everybody who's watching us, anyone who's joining in with this live right now, if you could take a moment to answer that question for yourselves. Where do you feel most confident? What do you want to be more confident in? Recognizing, I think it's important for us to recognize, first of all, that all of us do have confidence.
Yes.
We do. We've all had the confidence to join this live today. That's just a really basic example. A lot of us have the confidence to get out of bed, to have a shower. A lot of us find that we have confidence in different ways. You in golf?
Yeah.
I played you at golf. He's got a lot of confidence. I don't have confidence in golf. I have confidence in
But
swimming.
he still beat me.
That's a whole separate story. And now, funnily enough, my confidence has grown somewhat. But ask yourselves a simple question. Where do you feel most confident? Start with that. And what do you want to be more confident in? Recognizing that we're all confident somewhere. Neil, where do you feel most confident?
Where do I feel most confident? I feel most confident in doing things like my job. I'm very, very confident in what I do, what I can bring to the party. I'm pretty kind of a level guy, so I've really got a lot of confidence around that. Surprisingly, I'd like to be more confident now because I used to have a job where I was actually, communicating with lots and lots of people. If that was in front of me now, I would struggle massively. So I want to get more confidence or build more confidence in actually extending my social circle. I'm comfortable with 2 or 3, but that for me that's a building block. So I'd like to gain more confidence in larger social circles. So I have a circle of possibly friends or work colleagues or whatever that's quite small. I'm comfortable with that. But I also recognize that if I don't actually make that bigger, I'm kind of missing out on things. So I'd love to have a little bit more confidence, but I'm also confident enough that I know I can build that confidence.
That's true. So you're good with what you've got effectively now, but you're recognizing that there are opportunities for growth, for fun that actually lie outside of your comfort zone right now. And therein comes the determination to get you hooked up potentially with a few more people. I really like that. For myself, where I'm feeling confident, actually, I'll skip that because I've just seen we've got a comment that's come up on the screen. I'm better around kind, genuine, wise, patient people. So feeling confident around people that might be of a similar ilk, perhaps to yourself, Rachel, there. Kind, genuine, wise, patient people. So around people that perhaps match your values, but struggling around controlling, bossy types. So there's a question that comes to mind for me right now. Do you want to feel more confident around controlling, bossy types? Some people, that might be something they actually need to do in order to get to where it is that they want to do. You can't choose your work colleagues, you can't choose your neighbours, that kind of thing. So you might want to get more confident in that regard. But it's also possible to build a life where you don't necessarily need to have those people in your life.
That's exactly how I was going to answer it, Charlie. I think we've got to kind of be in the mindset of what's going to give us the best value. And that comment kind of resonates with me a little bit, because I don't want now to struggle around controlling and bossy type of people. I would rather actually build my resilience and my confidence and my self-esteem with the people that I want to build it around. Those people, once I start building my skill set up, I may well be able to then start engaging with people with that, but it'll be a different concept. I'd do work around assertive behavior. I'd do work around making sure that my communication is correct. And I may well then find that I'm better at around those people. But at the moment, for me personally, I don't want those people. I just want the people that have my core values as well, in terms of genuine people, wise people, patient people. And that again leads back to the core values. And I'm sure Charlie will probably pick this up a little bit later. When we're doing this kind of work, we've really got to remember that it sits with our core values. Because if we actually do something that doesn't sit with our core values, that can have an adverse effect on your self-esteem and your self-confidence. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. See, it's the fine balancing act, isn't it?
Yes.
We're always encouraging people to take steps in the right direction. But that right direction, firstly, is subjective. It's different from person to person.
Yes.
And I would never encourage you to combat a fear or to put yourself into a situation which you just don't need in your life. This ties in directly to a conversation I had with, funny enough, my mother yesterday. Terrible weather. I decided to go for a sea swim, is what I decided to do. And my mum was going to come, but she decided not to. She kind of sat on the shore. It was like, Charlie, why don't you swim to that boy over there? I started to go out, and I looked down, and I couldn't see the bottom. And I actually do have a petrifying fear of the deep. I really, really don't like deep sea swimming. And I turned around, I came back, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. She was like, why don't you do it? It'll be good for you. I was like, Mum, I just don't need to do this in my life. There are so many other things that I enjoy. There are lots of fears that I've had to tackle. But swimming to that boy and back, it's not going to affect my mental health.
No.
So I don't need to do that. That was the bottom line. And it's kind of as similar to this, pick and choose your battles.
Yeah.
Go into the ones which actually have real meaning for you, the ones that are going to better you. But if it's deep sea swimming and you're not going to be a deep sea diver, don't bother.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my
It's
little
a great
bit of wisdom.
analogy you've just used, and I think it encompasses both our answers there, doesn't it? In terms of, as Charlie said, we're all unique individuals. We've got to remember that. So if there's a battle, not so much a battle, but if there's something there that you don't need to kind of work on, fight, if you want to call it whatever you want, then don't. Just be mindful of the things that will actually bring you what Charlie quite rightly said, happiness, contentment, because those are the things that will lead to your wellness.
That's it. And that right there is where we want to be building our confidence.
Yeah.
Recognizing that we already have confidence in some areas, it is just about transferring. Exactly. Not necessarily building a mountain or climbing a mountain rather, but transferring that same kind of attitude and mindset that we have in those areas to the areas that we recognize in ourselves we need it most. And that does take an element of action, because fundamentally we're going to have to change some beliefs that we might hold, but that's okay. I want us to have a look at the next question. This one, I suppose, won't come up on screen, but I did just see it pop up. What's the difference between confidence and self-esteem? Don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah.
I did kind of explain that very briefly at the start. Lovely, we've got it on screen here. I'm just going to reiterate. Confidence relates to the beliefs, the key word here is beliefs, the beliefs that you hold about yourself to perform a task. I'm not confident at golf. I've not practiced golf. Neil is confident at golf. He has the belief whenever he picks up a golf club that he's going to be able to hit a ball 200 yards. I do not have that belief. I'm not confident to do that. That is all external. Self-esteem is internal. It is how we feel about ourselves. Again, the key word here is belief. Do we believe that we are a kind person? Do we believe that we are worthy of love, success, happiness? Or do we have something a bit different? Do we believe that we are broken? Do we believe that we're unlovable? Do we believe that we're ineffective? Do we believe that we're less worthy than other people? And that's self-esteem right there. I'll just say a little comment that's worth making at this point. The reason this is so important is that self-esteem has been hypothesized by a gentleman called John Bradshaw. or poor self-esteem is underpinning a lot of common mental health issues. So it's one that we want to address. If you recognize that you're carrying that, we want to start to work on that. But to link the two, the key word, beliefs. Beliefs is something that we pick up throughout our lives, whether we believe we're good or incapable. And herein starts to lie the answer. To get better with our confidence, self-esteem, we need to take steps outside of our comfort zones, a bit like you perhaps meeting larger groups of people. And then what we'll find is we start to redefine those beliefs. We rewrite our inner narratives. We start to recognize that we're worthwhile. We start to recognize we can rather than can't. And from there, we blossom.
Yes.
And so many of the other good things start to come back into our lives.
I think that a lot of it is about how we actually talk to ourselves. And if you talk to yourselves on a regular basis negatively, for instance, like Charlie's saying, I'm not going to do something because I know from previous experiences that that's not going to work, or I'm going to fail, or I'm going to embarrass myself, all those kinds of things. And when we talk about the inner narrative or the inner voice that we have, if we constantly do that on a regular basis, it's very difficult to start changing that until you start taking some actions. And I'm sure Charlie and I will talk about it in a minute. It's about taking very small steps and celebrating even the smallest kind of success that you have. We talk about this often, don't we? Lots of people that suffer from anxiety, for instance. And sometimes we can do something, choose my words right here, but sometimes we set ourselves up for failure. Do you know Charlie said about the bar is here and that's what you're trying to get to, but you achieve this. What we tend to find when we're not talking positively to ourselves is to forgetting that bit that we've actually got to rather than reaching there. And that's all about setting the boundaries, managing your goals and all that kind of stuff. And as I say, we'll talk about it in a minute. And one of the key things for me in my well-being was I had to start talking about things that were specifically happened on a regular basis, as small as it might be, and just celebrate that as a success. And I started to change the way I actually spoke to myself. I've used this many a time. I think I was in the same workshop with you, actually, it might have been. Whereas I remember that when I was starting with Isseropia, going to a workshop, and one of the key things that Isseropia always talk about is celebrating even the smallest things. And I had this workshop, and I was given a sheet of paper, and it says, right, what were your successes for this week, Neil? And I was stuck for ages. But then because of the group itself, and because there was peers in there, I wrote something down. Do you remember what I wrote? I said on the sheet that I did my washing up. And I was scared of actually presenting that in front of the group. But when I did, believe it or not, everybody gave me a round of applause. It didn't mean anything to them, but it was important to me. So then that built my confidence up. So I'm thinking that small thing actually means a lot to me. And I got, in this situation, plaudits for it. That just went, whoa. So next time, I'll tell them I've done the washing up every day this week. And that's how you kind of build. It's a really good foundation. I know it's a stupid thing to say, but
no, it's not.
That's how it happened for me.
It's absolutely not stupid. That's the thing. Sometimes we can already be the first to berate ourselves and to label something as insignificant, but none of it is.
No.
But the more we commit, the easier it gets, the more pride we have, and that's where the inner working starts to happen. We actually start to, again, nurture that self-compassion, nurture that respect that we have. When we're able to start to see that actually we are achieving in some areas. It's brilliant. So should we have a look at the next question or comment? We will see what pops up on the screen. I don't believe I'm able to achieve anything. Is that a confidence problem? So yes and no. Yes and no is what it can be. I think what this makes me want to do is to draw back again perhaps to the difference between confidence and self-esteem. Both of them are related to beliefs. One is about how we feel about ourselves, and the other is related to our ability to perform tasks in the outside world. If you don't feel that you're able to achieve something quite specific, that tends to point me towards it being a confidence issue.
It would me as well.
Yeah. There are things that I don't feel confident in. There are things that Neil doesn't feel confident in. And they tend to be quite, specific situations.
Yes.
That's what they tend to be. However, if we start to feel that we're not able to achieve anything at all,
yes,
then that points me more towards self-esteem, that underlying total sense, universal sense that we can't achieve, which is again linked to that those negative self-esteem beliefs. Yeah. So it can be a confidence problem, but for me, this actually is probably more closely related to self-esteem. Again, I just want to take us back to John Bradshaw. If we feel that we're not able to achieve anything, which is kind of a symptom that's often coupled with depression a lot of the time, we can relate that back to self-esteem, understand what John Bradshaw was saying as well, that underneath all of it, again, self-esteem is hugely important. Is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Well, again, this is really just links back to me. This is definitely self-esteem issue that person may well be suffering with at the moment. But that, again, links directly back for me, in my experience, is to our inner narrative. We kind of, when we have these situations, whatever your mind is telling you, you kind of just almost rubber stamp it, or you just accept it as real, as the real thing. You don't believe it. So if you don't believe it, then you're not going to achieve it. And I love the scenario that Charlie uses on a regular basis when we have a bit of a chat, where if you start thinking about certain situations that you don't believe you can do something, and you just continue down that line, if you start to do something and you build on that success, that don't changes into things like, I now believe. And it's kind of stepping stones. And when we talked about the golf, I'll come back to your scenario that you use, coming back to the golf situation, that's really down to practice. But Charlie, when I invited him to the golf situation, first of all, for a period of time, hope you don't think I'm talking out of turn here, was saying, I don't want to go. I don't want to go because I don't want to get embarrassed in front of you, Neil. And it was almost a case of, Charlie, just come, because I think you'll enjoy it more, and you're missing out on just us having an hour together. It doesn't really matter about the golf. We go out to the golf, he gets a bit of practice, and he hits the best shot in the entire world, last shot of the day, and beats me. Now, what did that do for your confidence in that scenario?
Well, what it taught me very quickly there is that actually it's something that I not can just practice, but actually I enjoyed that moment. I enjoyed golf. I might not be the best at golf, but I can get better, as was kind of proven throughout that.
And just linking away from the golf effectively, what did it do for your self-esteem? Because there was, I know we worked together, guys, don't get me wrong, but there was that connection outside of just work.
Exactly.
It's that connection that we had for an hour or two. We shot the breeze, we spoke, we had a cup of tea, and that then actually builds all different elements, because prior to those kind of situations, Charlie and Neil are just work colleagues, but I think both of us have said we want to create something more than that, because it gives us something more on top of just doing that. So it's not really about the golf.
It's about the community.
It's about the community side of it.
Confidence is gained from that, and what happened in that moment is that we formed a 2-person golfing community.
Yes.
That's what we did.
There you go.
Like I say, that sense of belonging, it does wonders for self-esteem is what it does. Not just golf, which I know is your favourite sport in the whole world, but any
football is
community.
But I won't get him to play football.
That now would be the time, but we won't do that yet. No. All right, should we have a look at the next comment or question, see what pops up? We have, we're there. What can I do to improve my confidence and self-esteem? So this is probably the burning question. Yeah. Understanding how important it is, understanding that we might have had things that have knocked us into this state, understanding the anxiety and the depression, loads of other symptoms that might come from lacking it. What can we do now to start to lift ourselves out of that whole. I will say, here at Isseropia, we have a list or a guide, effectively, that we like to talk through about things that we can do to improve our confidence, self-esteem. It is by no means exhaustive. It is by no means a complete list. There are so many things that we can do. But what we'll start to find is that generally our confidence and self-esteem, or actually I'll focus on self-esteem, generally our self-esteem is lacking because our expectations are here.
Yep.
And we are here.
Yep.
What needs to happen for us to have self-esteem is a reconciliation of reality, where it is that we're at, and our expectations. Okay, and we're not too bothered. We know who it is that we are. So, going back to this, want to bring these two together. If this is where we're at now, one step to build self-esteem is to take action.
Yep.
To start to get ourselves back in line with our expectations, so we're taking that pride again, and we're back where it is that we want to be in life. However, we can also do a little bit of work around self-acceptance, recognizing that in our imperfections, we might already be just about okay, recognizing our strengths, recognizing what it is that we have. So we're left broadly with two options. Do we start to match our expectations, or do we bring our expectations back in line with ourselves?
And that's a really, really good point, Charlie, and that's where I found so much benefit. I was, in certain aspects of my life, a perfectionist. I needed to achieve a certain standard, and if I didn't achieve that, then my inner dialogue started to say, well, that was deemed as a failure. And when you say that you're trying to find that balance, it's okay to not be perfect every time. And that's how you can start to build blocks, because if you lower that expectation for a period of time and you get that balance, you then might start to actually improve your expectations and move them back up. So you're on a what's the word? Upward spiral rather than a downward spiral.
That's it. We can then start to find they're actually on a virtuous cycle.
Virtual, that's the one I was looking for.
Yeah, that kind of takes us upwards and upwards. That's it. But ultimately what needs to happen is just a bringing together of reality and where we're at. So if I can walk us through some of the things that we like to discuss here at Isseropia, we like to firstly have a look at challenging our thoughts. And challenging our thoughts is something that's quite closely linked to depression and anxiety in particular. But it's about recognizing that thoughts are not facts. A lot of the time we can start to take the way that we're interpreting a situation at face value. I can't possibly do this. I can't do golf. I can't do golf, Neil. I can't do golf. Challenging our thoughts. Firstly, just creating a space for us to question whether the way that we're interpreting things, is that necessarily true? I can't do golf. Change into a maybe I can't do golf. Maybe I'm not seeing all of the facts here. And challenging our thoughts really is about recognizing when we're focusing entirely on a negative outcome or a negative catastrophic realization, and then gently challenging that to bring ourselves around to what is probably a more realistic appraisal of our ability to do something. And the good thing is, if we're struggling, if we're looking at more realistic kind of thought processes, more positive is what it is almost every single time.
Yes.
So yeah, it's about making that distinction between fact, opinion, taking out the opinion, taking it back to the basics, and switching to a positive mindset. If we're talking about, this guy again, that's kind of the expectations side of thing, more so. It helps to prepare us for some of the steps that we might need to take.
Yes. But it also, for me, helps to prepare you for that situation where you feel that you might have failed. That sounds a bit odd. What I'm trying to get to there is, if your expectations are lower, you're more inclined to hit that expectation rather than up there, getting quite a good way to where it is, and then something hits you, a curveball comes along, and it's almost, you just feel that you've just gone straight back to zero and it wasn't worth all that hard work. So it's really just capturing those thoughts, and as Charlie said, it's kind of, after a while you can start to analyze them. Is this factual, or is it my opinion of myself or the situation or whatever? And once you start delving into that kind of stuff, it just builds those building blocks, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It certainly does. This is one of the first ways we need to make changes. I've just seen that we've got a couple of comments that have come up. They're not on our screen for everyone to see.
Let's have a look.
There was one that I saw. How can I get the support of the Seropia? And I just want to make this clear at the minute. We're not quite self-referral, as the person who made the comment asked. We're not quite there yet. Perhaps in the future we're hoping to be. But currently the way that you can seek the support of the Seropia is either from secondary mental health. So that's something that you can look at if you're involved with chantry or something like that on the island. Otherwise, you can seek a referral through your GP. I believe that there are mental health practitioners in every single surgery. If you go through them, you can have a referral, generally if you ask through your GP as well. So it is something to bear in mind, and certainly if you'd like to join us, then please just go and seek that referral, and hopefully we'll be able to support you before too long. And there was another one. Are all these questions set before the session? The main ones that we have on screen, we've kind of picked up before the session, as you say there. But also, if there are any questions that you want to ask, just ask. Just ask. We're here to the ones that we've gathered from before and the ones that arise during this session as well. Coming back to it, back to the question that we have on screen. How do we improve confidence and self-esteem? We've tackled challenging our thoughts. I think something that needs to be acknowledged as well is we can look at the thought side of things. That's well and useful. But ultimately, we need to learn to take risks and to leave our comfort zones where we want to, where it's going to be beneficial for us in the long run. Nobody starts off a master of anything. I think it was Ed Sheeran. There's probably many people that have said this, to be fair, but my understanding is that Ed Sheeran once said that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master of anything, to be able to build confidence. And how he got to where it is that he is, a lot of time, a lot of effort, an awful lot of practice, but he's now at the place where he is totally confident in his area. I can tell you he wasn't confident when he started off music initially. So we need to recognize the areas that we want to have more confidence in our lives, and then effectively start to take these risks. Design little, we call them exposure, what do we call them? Exposure, the
techniques.
Words.
And
The words
gradual exposure.
It's
gradual exposure, and that's really Charlie's explaining a little bit like I said there. Let's go back to the scenario that I talked about. I'd love to be in front of larger groups. If I tried that almost immediately, I had a shakubuku moment and said to you, Charlie, I'm going to go and stand in front of 300 people tonight, and I'm going to do a presentation. Do you really think that wouldn't create things like anxiety and fear and all those types of things? And because I do it all in one go, it's probably fair to say there will be a mess because my mindset's not in the right place. And when we're talking about gradual exposure in that kind of situation that I'm talking about, that's exactly what I'm doing in terms of I started to communicate and reconnect with people that were important to me at that point in time. I then find myself in a position where I've now got colleagues around work, which is a greater amount of people. So the next step would be to maybe up my group outside of work colleagues and invite 2 other people in. And then gradually, this is gradual exposure, build that to where I want it to be. I don't no longer want to be presenting in front of 300 people, but I'd like to be in a room around that amount of people. So I can't do it all in one go. And when we talk about gradual exposure, that's a real fundamental one for me. In terms, if you try and do it too quick, you can actually have an adverse effect. But if you do it gradually, but the most important thing is if you're going to decide to do it gradually, you have to take the action. And I'm sure you'll agree with that. Sometimes we can find ourselves procrastinating and all those kinds of things. We set ourselves a goal and then we get anxious about trying to achieve that goal. So my advice would be set a goal that is achievable and set a plan that is achievable.
That's it.
In a very short period of time and just build on it.
That's it. It's about taking ourselves back, isn't it, to that, to what we were talking about earlier. Small, achievable. We need to look at the areas that we want to build confidence in and then make deliberate steps to do that. Because we can have all the self-awareness in the world, we can understand the depths of why it is that we feel the way that we do. But if we're not willing to take action around it, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
I don't like myself and don't have any self-esteem. How do I get more self-esteem? I'm very pleased to have this comment on screen. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, David. So, not having self-esteem, we've kind of started to establish this a little bit. There are a great many ways that we can start to do it. But ultimately, we either want to bring ourselves in line with the expectations that we hold ourselves for how we want to be in the world. Or I saw another comment, actually, fun enough, that was kind of in reply to that. I can't see it quite yet on screen, but I think it kind of mentioned compassion. Self-compassion, self-love. We got it here. Kindness and compassion to yourself is a start. I find it helps me. So that's a brilliant one. I think the first thing that we want to do is to recognize that the way that we feel about ourselves isn't necessarily our own fault. It isn't something that we chose. We didn't choose to feel the way that we do about ourselves, but rather it is something that has happened to us over the course of our lifetimes because of X, Y, Z, the things that have happened.
Yeah.
If we've had history of being ostracized, bullied, put down, called names, naturally we're going to start to question our own value as a human being. And that is something that is out of your control. Recognizing that, it is a very dangerous trap that a lot of people can start to fall in. When they feel that the way they feel about themselves is other people's fault, we can turn to a place of anger and blame.
Yes.
We can go to, it's society's fault, it's their fault. And as much as you might be right, if you start to go down that angry kind of way, it doesn't resolve anything. And actually, anger starts to lead us to its own prison, is what it does. We can find ourselves sitting and living in resentment for years and decades. And this is something that I'm sure we regularly see in members as they come through. And understanding that it's other people's fault, perhaps, for the way that they feel. But if we stick with that, we're not taking responsibility for the way that we have to then manage it. The way that I like to explain mental health, it's like a double slap.
I knew you were going to say that.
I haven't used this analogy in a while, and I've forgotten it, but it's great. Number one, you've been gifted it. It's not your fault that you have it, but you have it. The second slap, it's down to you to sort it out.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we've got this hand of cards that we've been given now, and it's our duty to understand it and to be able to go forward with that. So number one, understanding it's not our fault, not going to blame or resentment. Then we have to do a little bit of acceptance. Well, actually, it's more understanding for why we feel the way that we do. Joining support groups, community groups, a lot like the one that we have here. What it starts to help us to do is to realize that actually we're not odd. We're not different. We're not on our own, but rather we're a real person that's come up against real adversity and challenge in their life and is now just left dealing with a natural fallout. When we can start to see that connection, that community forming, we start to have that sense of belonging that we're not alone, there are other people that are going through this. We can then start to access these different tools and tricks that help us to climb out of that hole. You can do it on your own. You can do it on your own. I've seen people do it on their own.
Yes.
But it's much easier when you've got a group of people.
There's no doubt about that. And then just going quickly back onto that, kindness and compassion to yourself is the start. That for me was almost the key to the lock for me, because I felt that I had to kind of fall back in love with myself before I could actually start to develop myself. And that, when I realized that I didn't love myself for particular reasons or whatever, if I didn't actually start from inside here, I couldn't really kind of, live my life how I wanted to live. So for me, that really does connect with me, because kindness and compassion is something I do on a regular basis. And it could be simple things, because we're talking about solutions. Like just waking up in the morning and just being thankful for the day. And then I wake up in the morning and I might actually, under my breath, say, thank you for something. Being kind to myself. You are actually an integral part of society, Neil. Just little things like that it can sound a bit hippy-dippy when you start those kinds of things, but that for me just unlocked things for me.
It's the start of inner healing. That's what it is. It has to be acknowledged. I'm afraid to say I can see that we're coming up to time.
Yeah.
And I would just like to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've got one comment that's come up. Excellent live, thanks. Proud of us all, and as so you should be, anybody who's joined in today and recognises, because that is a hard step to acknowledge. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Charlie. Love to David. Proud I overcome being on public lives. Hugs to everyone. I think this comment really encapsulates what we want to be saying. Lots of viscerobia love, lots of hugs to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The final thing I want to say is we are going to be doing weekly lives from here on out. They're going to be happening on a Friday at noon, hopefully every Friday, unless there's a bank holiday or anything that interferes. And next week, we're going to be looking at anxiety. So if you would like to join us then, please do. It's going to be myself, Neil. You won't be joining us for that one. You'll have a chance to meet Natalie, who's another member of our team. And in the meantime, if you've connected with anything that we've discussed today, do not hesitate to seek a referral to us through your GPs, your mental health practitioners, through Chantry, and otherwise keep engaging with the content that we put on the public page, because that is available to everybody and all of that has hidden gems in there. It has been a pleasure. Thank you all very much. Take care, and we will see you before too long.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.